What's up, viewers? I'm Ryan Wilson,
I'm Evan Love.
And I'm Owen Hurley.
and this is Inside the Huddle. Now, as you may know, NFL is back, and Week 1 has completed, and we're here to give you our recap of the week and our predictions for next week. Now, the first game that we saw last week was the Bills versus the Rams, as the Bills just destroyed the Rams, winning 31-10. I think Josh Allen looked very good in that game. He has a chance to win the MVP this year, and the Rams definitely struggled. Matt Stafford had a couple bad plays, and they really need to regroup themselves after that.
Yeah, as returning champions, they have a lot of work to do to improve for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
And then the Saints played the Falcons, which was a very close game. And
The next game we watched was the Browns versus Panthers. Even though the Browns came on top 26-24, it was still, both teams did terrible on offense. And obviously Baker Mayfield had a lot of pressure with playing his old team. So,
yeah, I mean, it was a close battle till the very end. Except the Panthers scoring 17 in the fourth quarter, which helped a comeback, but it wasn't enough to defeat the Browns. Baker Mayfield looked good on the Panthers. Christian McCaffrey struggled a little bit. And as for the Browns, Jacoby Brissett looked like he can be a decent quarterback for him.
Unfortunately, Baker Mayfield's additions to the team could not pull them forward ahead of the Browns in the end, and the Browns got a victory.
Next, the Bears played the 49ers at Chicago in a very wet game, which didn't have much offense, but the Niners struggled as Trey Lance could barely mustered up 150 passing yards. He threw a pick as well. He looked okay on the ground as he had 13 carries for 54 yards.
Justin Fields didn't do too well either, with only 121 passing yards. None of them really did that good, honestly, in that game. That game was a struggle for both teams on both sides. All the players really kind of struggled with their offense.
And, I mean, the Bears, who would have thought in the fourth quarter, coming back, scoring 12 unanswered points, as Justin Fields seemed like he strung it together, but if they play like that, they're not going to win many games this year.
right.
Then we had the Steelers winning 23-20 against the Bengals, and which was just a wacky game.
This was a very interesting game. Like, nobody knew what was going on in Cincinnati as these two teams faced off, but
The overtime was very interesting, with neither team being able to score, and Evan McPherson missing the game-winning field goal was very interesting, seeing as how last season he was pretty much perfect on his field goals, never really missed one, and he missed the game-winning field goal. But it still was a close game, and in overtime the Steelers won 23-20.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Burrow, you could tell he had a little bit of rust and knockoff as he attempted 53 passes, only converting 33 of them, and he had 6 turnovers this game, which if you're a Bengals fan, you were definitely cringing at the sight of Joe Burrow throwing 4 interceptions. And Jamar Chase looked good, but they just need to regroup because they still got a little bit of rust and knockoff after that Super Bowl run.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the Philadelphia Eagles played at Detroit, which a lot of people didn't think would be a very close game, but the Eagles only won by 3, in which, as a Detroit fan myself, I am actually proud of the Detroit Lions because their offense looked pretty good, and Jared Goff threw for 215 yards, 2 touchdowns. He looked pretty good, but DeAndre Swift had a big day, and Amon-Ra St. Brown looked good.
Jalen Hurts had 243 yards. He did pretty well. Their team did all right. It was an interesting game to see, for sure.
Yeah, Philadelphia did good in the running game with all 3 of their running backs had a TD, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it looked like it was a blowout all until the fourth quarter. Detroit scoring 14 unanswered. And,
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a Detroit fan, this is something that you can build off of going into the next weeks.
Yeah, we'll definitely see some improvement from both teams going into week 2.
Yes.
Then the Colts played at Houston, which was just it was an interesting game to say the least, as it went to overtime.
First tie of the season.
Yes, neither team being able to win the game, and they're both in the tie column, which for me, I thought Jonathan Taylor would lead the Colts to a win, but he did have a monster day. 31 carries, 160 yards, and a touchdown. And Matt Ryan, I mean, he threw for 350 yards, a pick, and a touchdown. But
Davis Mills had 2 touchdowns, 240 yards. Not a bad game, but surprisingly, the Colts, they held against the Colts with not as many chances.
Yeah, Davis Mills, he looked pretty good in this game. 240 yards and 2 touchdowns. If you're a Texans fan, you're probably excited for this year, as they're looking pretty good tying the Colts. And then the Patriots played against the Dolphins, which was just a disaster for New England, as they could only score 7 points the whole game, and it just kind of looked like the Dolphins were just controlling the game, as Tua threw 270 yards and a touchdown. Tyreek Hill had a couple receptions and almost 100 yards, but Jalen Waddle really won this game with his touchdown. He had 4 catches for 69 yards, averaging 17 yards per catch, which was just a great day for him.
Yeah, nobody knew really what was going to happen with Tyreek Hill, and obviously working with his new quarterback, and he did really good for his first game with the Dolphins, catching 8 of his 12 targets for 94 yards.
Yeah, the Patriots really seem to struggle this game, and hopefully they can get it together for the rest of the season, but it doesn't look like they will be able to.
The next game we saw was the Baltimore Ravens versus the New York Jets. Obviously, the Baltimore Ravens came out on top, 24-9, but I feel like a lot of us knew that was going to happen, and they were ahead of the whole game. There wasn't really a lot of competition in this game. I mean, Lamar Jackson, he threw 3 touchdown passes, 2 to Duvernay, and the Ravens rolled right past the Jets.
Yeah, I mean, I think Lamar, coming after his injury, he was just hungry to get a big game. I mean, I think you could just tell that the Baltimore Ravens were ready to take out the Jets in New York as well. But the Jets, I mean, their offense didn't look terrible either.
Joe Flacco had 309 yards. He only had 1 touchdown, and he had an interception as well.
Yeah, besides Joe Flacco throwing for 60 attempts, they couldn't really string together much offense besides that. And then the Jaguars, in a close one versus Washington, 22-28, in which it came down to the wire, and Washington came out on top. And Trevor Lawrence, after last year, he looks like he's been improving a lot, throwing for 275 yards, 1 touchdown, and an interception. I mean, James Robinson had a couple carries, 66 yards, and a touchdown. Christian Kirk had 117 yards receiving. They didn't look horrible. Their defense had a couple picks as well. So the Jaguars are building off of a pretty terrible season, but it looks like they're getting better.
The Commanders had a pretty good first game as well. Carson Wentz had 313 yards, 4 touchdowns. He had 2 interceptions, but they still came out on top on the end.
Yeah, Carson Wentz looked like he's returning back to his Philadelphia days with that game.
For sure.
Next, we have the Giants against the Titans, which, I mean, this game was just, it was wild down to the very end. I don't think anyone saw this coming, as Daniel Jones threw for 2 touchdowns and a pick, 188 yards, and Saquon Barkley. I mean, I think it's safe to say Saquon's back. He ran for 164 yards, touchdown. If you had him on your fantasy team, you'd be very pleased. Sterling Shepard had a monster game as well, touchdown, 2 receptions for 71 yards though.
Giants had 13 in the third quarter and 8 in the fourth quarter, which is ultimately really what led them to the win.
Yeah, I mean, Derrick Henry, he looked pretty good as well. But I mean, if you're a Tennessee fan, it's the first game of the year. It's nothing to be worried about. I think that they're going to be able to. They're definitely going to be able to get back to their former selves. And I mean, if you watch that game, it went down to the very end with a field goal
Yeah.
to decide the game. I mean, I was watching that. It was just incredible as the Giants or the Titans drove down and they missed the field goal to win the game.
The next game we have is the Chiefs versus the Cardinals, and well, the Cardinals really just ultimately ended up getting destroyed. Patrick Mahomes, 360 yards, 5 touchdowns. Yet again, he's just proving himself over and over, and he's definitely back, and he'll have a really good season this year as well.
Yeah, the Chiefs, I mean, they did really good. It was a fun to watch game. If you're a Chiefs fan, you're definitely really happy that they opened up their season with this, scoring more than double the Cardinals' points. But I think the Cardinals can come back in week 2.
Yeah, I mean, Mahomes just looked perfect out there. Kelsey had 8 receptions, 121 yards and a touchdown. He got Juju Smith-Schuster involved, one of his new targets, probably going to be possibly his number 1 wide receiver. They also had Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the passing game looking good as well. And, I mean, Kyler Murray, he didn't look too good until about the end. He started throwing some touchdowns then. But, again, it's the first game. There's a little bit of rust that needs to be shaken off. So the Cardinals are still going to be a good team.
Yeah, I mean, the Chiefs proved themselves, though, every single quarter. I mean, 14 in the first, 9 in the second, 14 in the third, and 7 again in the fourth. They really just proved that they could come back. I mean, and it'll definitely be a good season to watch if you're a Chiefs fan.
Yeah, next we have the Raiders, who lost to the Chargers 19-24. I think we remember this is kind of a rematch of the playoff spot where the Raiders beat the Chiefs or the Chargers to get into the playoffs. Derek Carr, 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 3 picks. Josh Jacobs didn't look as well, and Devontae Adams, he looked exceptional. 10 receptions, 140 yards, and a touchdown. Darren Waller, 80 yards as well. I think even though they lost, the Raiders are going to be a dangerous team as Devontae Adams is brand new to the team as well. And the chemistry they're going to have is going to be great.
Yeah, like Ryan said, it was a rematch of like what happened in the playoffs. This is just the Chargers showing that they can bounce back from wherever, and yeah.
Yeah, the Raiders almost had to come back there in the second half, but they still couldn't pull it off against the Chargers, who had 14 in the second quarter and then 7 in the third.
Yeah, I mean, Joey Bosa, he had a sack, 2 tackles. You're gonna be excited to watch him. Herbert threw for 280 yards and 3 touchdowns. I think the Chargers looked very good. And the next game was the Packers playing the Vikings, which let's just say it was the Justin Jefferson show as he had 9 receptions, 184 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And I think this, for the Vikings, could be the best season since Minneapolis Miracle that we remember a couple years ago. I think they can make a deep playoff run with Kirk Cousins looking pretty good as well. Dalvin Cook, he had 90 yards as well. But if Justin Jefferson's playing like this on a weekly basis, they're going to be the team to beat in the NFC.
Yeah, going into this game, I expect that the Vikings would pull it out. I think the Packers were going to come out on top, but the Vikings, Justin Jefferson is just, I have him on my fantasy team, and I won.
I mean, Aaron Rodgers still has some of the rust to shake off. He didn't do horribly, 195 yards. He had an interception, but he still has some rust to shake off. It's definitely that still shaking off the preseason rust, but we'll see how the season goes for him.
Yeah, I mean, I think we see this every year. Aaron Rodgers struggling in the first game. We saw this last year, but they came back and got the 1 seed in the NFC. But the difference here is they don't have Devontae Adams anymore, and it's just the Packers are going to be an interesting team. Then we had the Bucs versus the Cowboys, which was just, I mean, the Cowboys couldn't do anything on offense after Dak Prescott got injured. And if you're a Cowboys fan, this is just it's a nightmare all over again with Dak Prescott out. They're going to have to rely heavily on Ezekiel Elliott, which, I mean, sometimes isn't the best option because ever since his first couple years, he just hasn't been as good. But the Buccaneers, Tom Brady, I mean, he looked good, but I don't think that Tom Brady's going to be having as good as a year.
Yeah, I don't think he'll be heavily carrying the team like it has been previously.
Yeah, I mean, they have Mike Evans, who looked pretty good. They also have Julio Jones, but I think the years are just taking on for Brady, and pretty soon he's going to be out of contention for best quarterback in the league.
And the final game we have is the Broncos versus the Seahawks, which was a close game with the Seahawks winning 17-16.
Yeah, I mean, Russell Wilson, he threw for 340 yards and a touchdown at Seattle, which I think it was just, I mean, I think, in my opinion, they should have won. Russell Wilson was having a great day. Jerry Jeudy looked great. He had a big reception for a touchdown in the first half. And the Seahawks, Geno Smith looked pretty good as well. Rashad Penny had a couple of carries for big yardage, and Seahawks came out on top.
The Saints and Falcons had a very close game with the score being 27-26 and the Saints taking a W.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a close game as Jameis Winston played really well. He had like 270 passing yards, 2 touchdowns and no picks. And in the fourth quarter, they scored 17 points, which had them come back and beat the Falcons. And the Saints this year, if Jameis Winston can keep playing like that, they can be a dangerous team in the NFC.
Yeah, with the Falcons having that big lead, and the Saints then scoring 2 touchdowns in the final quarter, they probably felt really bad because it's like they lost by 1 point, but they had the lead the whole time. So now we're going to give our predictions for Week 2 of the NFL.
First game we have is the Chargers versus the Chiefs. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game, but I have the Chiefs winning that one. Patrick Mahomes is going to continue to look great.
I also have the Chiefs winning. I think that'll be a little bit of a closer score than Ryan thinks. I think the Chargers will be able to try to hold themselves in the first half, but I think in the second half the Chiefs will come and they will take the win.
I also have the Chiefs winning that game because I think when they beat the Cardinals 44-21, I think they're going to come out with that same energy and just continue to do that for the season. I think it's going to be a fun season for them.
Yeah. The next game we have is the Patriots versus the Steelers. I think Steelers' offense is going to struggle this week. Najee Harris, I don't think, is going to look as good, and the Patriots will come out on top in a low-scoring game, but I think the Patriots are going to get the dub.
I have the Patriots winning as well. I also think it'll be a low-scoring game, but I think the Patriots will ultimately win. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Patriots are going to come out with high energy after their loss to the Dolphins, 7-20, and they're just going to fight back.
Yeah. And next we have the Panthers playing at New York, playing the Giants. I think that the Giants, they're going to do well. They're playing at home, obviously, and I think Baker Mayfield's going to struggle in that environment. And I think the Giants will actually have a great season this year, starting off with the win against the Panthers.
I have the Panthers actually winning that game. I think it'll be a close-scoring game, and I think the Panthers will ultimately win third quarter or fourth quarter. But ultimately, I think the Panthers will end up winning that game.
Yeah, I also agree. I think the Panthers are going to win that game.
Yeah. Next, we have the Jets playing the Browns. I think that the Browns will get the dub there. It's a home game, and I think Jets are not going to score very much, but the Browns are going to get the dub.
I have the Jets winning that one, and I actually think that they will win in overtime. I think that it'll be a close game for sure, but I think we'll see how that game goes.
Yeah, I also have the Jets. I think with their home game, their New York environment, I think it's just they're going to rock and roll with that.
Next, we have Colts playing at Jacksonville, playing the Jaguars. I think the Colts are just going to steamroll the Jaguars, win a high-scoring game, win by at least 3 touchdowns, and it's not going to be a competition.
I agree. I think the Colts are going to win. I don't think it'll be a super close game. I think they'll be showing themselves all 4 quarters, and I just think that the Colts will ultimately win.
Yeah, I also think the Colts are going to win. I think with Michael Pittman Jr., he's going to have a really good game, I feel like, and he's just going to go.
Next we have the Dolphins playing at the Ravens. I think the Ravens are just going to destroy the Dolphins. It's at Baltimore, and I think Lamar is going to put up MVP numbers again this year, and he's gonna start it off by playing the Dolphins and destroying them.
Yeah, I really just don't think the Dolphins are really going to have a chance this game. I think Lamar is really just going to come out there and he's just going to show that he ultimately will have a great season and that he'll be putting up MVP numbers again.
Yeah, I agree that the Ravens are going to take this one in their home environment and really show Baltimore what football is.
Yeah, and then we have the Buccaneers playing the Saints. I think past couple of years, as Tom Brady's been on the Bucs, they've struggled against the Saints. I think it's going to happen again in a low-scoring game. I think the Saints are going to win.
I think that ultimately the Bucs might win that game, but it could either be a Bucs win or a tie. As those two teams could end up close, as Tom Brady might not be putting up the same amount of numbers, passing yards, touchdowns that he has been before. He's getting older, so his abilities are decreasing. So I think that one will end up being a close game.
I actually think the Bucs are going to win this game because Winston, I think, is going to.
Okay, restart your sentence. Restart. I swear to God, Ryan, quit it. Restart.
I think.
Okay.
I'm going to look away.
Okay, go. We have like 5 minutes. Go.
I think that the same.
Okay, we're skipping your part.
Alright.
Okay.
Alright.
Okay, next.
The next game is Washington playing at Detroit. I think Detroit's going to get the dub here. I think they're going to win by a field goal in the end. And I think DeAndre Swift's going to have a monster day.
Yeah, I think that the Lions are going to win. I don't know. I think it'll end up being a close game, but I think the Lions will ultimately come out on top against the Commanders. The Commanders don't really can't really put up against the Lions, I don't really think. So I think the Lions will ultimately come out on top, prove themselves even in the first half.
I agree with the Lions. I think it's going to be a good day in Detroit for Detroit fans because I feel like they're going to be happy with the win.
Next we have Seahawks versus the Niners. I think Niners, it's going to be a low-scoring game. Trey Lance has yet to prove himself as a rightful QB1, but I think they're going to shut out the Seahawks.
Yeah, I agree. Honestly, I think that the 49ers really just aren't going to be able to hold up against the Seahawks. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with the Niners. I think it's going to be a really close game, but ultimately the Niners are going to come out on top.
Then we have the Falcons playing at Los Angeles playing the Rams, and I think the Rams are going to get the dub there. They're going to bounce back after that terrible game that they had against Buffalo. But I don't think it's going to be a close game either. The Falcons are no joke this year, and I think it's going to be close, but the Rams getting the win.
I think the Rams also will win. I just don't think they'll really I just don't think the Falcons will really hold a chance against the Rams. I think the Rams this game will try to prove that they definitely did deserve the Super Bowl win last year, and they can still defend their title.
Yeah, I also think the Rams are going to win. I think it's going to be high energy in Los Angeles at SoFi Stadium. I feel like the fans are just going to be booming. The players are going to be booming, and it's going to be awesome.
Next, we have the Cardinals playing the Raiders. Obviously, it's a home game for the Raiders, but I think Kyler Murray is going to be ready to bounce back after that loss to Patrick Mahomes. And I think it's going to be a high-scoring game, but the Cardinals are going to get the dub against the Raiders.
I ultimately think that the Cardinals will win. I think the Raiders will hold with their defense and offense really until the end, but I think the Cardinals will ultimately win. Yeah.
Yeah, I also think that the Cardinals are going to win. Yeah, I also think that the Cardinals are going to win. I think James Conner is going to have an amazing game, and even though they're not in their home environment, they're still going to destroy them.
Then we have the Texans playing the Broncos. Away game for the Texans. I'm just going to keep it simple. Texans suck. They're going to lose, not score anything.
Yeah, I definitely think that the Broncos will take the W on this one. I don't really think the Texans will be able to hold themselves, but we'll see if they can.
I actually think the Texans are going to win, and that Ryan is completely wrong. And I don't think the Broncos are going to have enough to beat them.
Then we have the Bengals playing the Cowboys.
Okay. Next, we have
the Bengals playing the Cowboys. I think the Bengals are going to bounce back. No Dak Prescott for the Cowboys. They're going to struggle on offense. Bengals taking the dub.
I definitely think that the Bengals will come back from last game against the Steelers. I definitely think that they're going to try to prove themselves again, that they still did. It wasn't really just a one-time thing with them going to the Super Bowl. I think they'll definitely defeat the Cowboys here.
Yeah, I also think the Bengals are going to defeat the Cowboys. I think Evan McPherson is just going to bounce back from that monstrosity of whatever that was down in Cincinnati last week, because that was terrible.
And then we have the Bears playing the Packers. Aaron Rodgers owns the Bears. He's going to continue to, as they're going to beat the Bears.
I agree. Packers are going to beat the Bears. Yeah, I mean, there's not really much to it.
I agree with that.
Yeah, and then we have Titans playing the Bills. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game with the Bills coming out on top, as Josh Allen is just the clear-cut best quarterback in the league right now, in my opinion.
I think Bills are going to come out on top. They're going to be proving that they're going to be a contender for this season. I mean, especially with the last game against the Rams, I think they're just going to prove themselves again.
I think that this is going to be a really close game, but ultimately Josh Allen is going to
Get the dub.
Yeah.
Then Vikings playing at the Eagles. I think it's going to be close. Justin Jefferson going to have a good day. Hurts going to have a good day. But in the end, they're going to win by a field goal at the end of the quarter.
I think that the Vikings will end up winning. I really just don't know if the Eagles will be able to contend with the Vikings, but we'll see. I mean, the Philadelphia might take the dub, but we'll see.
There is no way what you said is just right. The Eagles are going to come out on top with Jalen Hurts just doing awesome.
All right, that has been that concludes the first edition of Inside the Huddle. I'm Evan.
I'm Ron.
And I'm Owen. Thank you for watching Inside the Huddle.